Telesa stirred from her unconsciousness. She tried to sit up. Pain shot through her body. Looking around, she discovered she wasn't on the observation ledge anymore, or below it. She had been taken to a small bare room. She wondered if Dr. Farrell or Nichols had found her then left her for some reason. Her tricorder had been dropped beside her. Slowly she dragged herself to it, readjusting the device's function. She scanned her body. Just as she feared, she had broken 2 ribs in her right ankle. Her left arm had been injured too, only a sprain though. She activated her communicator. She knew she wouldn't be able to stand and leave the room without assistance. The device was dead though, jarred from her fall. Suddenly the whirlwind returned. Gathering the deck's dust, it loomed over Telesa. Letting scientific curiosity take the place of fear, she scanned the swirling mass of dust. The small screen in the device snapped on with a picture of the cloud. At the center was a glowing golden mass. Telesa looked up at the cloud. The mass was not visible to the naked eye. Slowly, the mass, depicted on the small screen, took shape. Telesa gasped. The turning glow took on the shapely curves of a female. The fully formed woman smiled. Telesa looked at the cloud again. Within, the golden woman was becoming visible to her. Telesa put her tricorder down when she could plainly see the woman. Telesa activated her suit's universal translator.
I am Commander Telesa, First Officer of the United Starship Excalibur. Do you understand me?
The woman said nothing, but simply smiled down at her. Telesa could make out that she looked human enough, and she wore some sort of a uniform. She noted the star-like insignia on the woman's right breast, and the 5 braids sewn across the under chest on the left side of the garment.
My ship found your vessel while returning to our duty base. You are on a direct collision course, with a station in orbit around that base. Do you understand?
This time the woman nodded. Slowly her form floated nearer to Telesa. The form knelt by the injured Vulcan, and offered her a luminescent hand. Close up, Telesa could see that her body was slightly transparent. Instinctive fear made Telesa draw back from her hand. The small retreat cost her considerable pain. The figure smiled warmly, as if assuring her that she would be taken care of. Then the figure dove onto Telesa, the cloud of dust engulfing both. The figure's transparent form merged with Telesa's flesh, her mind fusing with Telesa's, and then the two were one. Telesa's mind was filled with memories and thoughts not of her own. She suddenly realized that she was beginning to take on the personality of another being, the transparent woman. Telesa sat in the command chair on the globe ship's bridge, but it was not her, yet was. She was living someone else's life now. She was now that someone else. A name rebounded in her shared mind with the other. It was Jade Eve. That's who she was now. All around her were people dressed in red jumpsuits, black belts, and boots. Each wore a star emblem on their right breast, and each wore assorted numbers of golden braids across their chest. They all spoke in a strange language, yet Telesa could understand every word. Her hand came up to rub her chin. She also wore the red uniform, only she had 5 braids across her chest.
"Fleet Admiral,"
said a tall, imposing, dark-skinned man standing beside the command chair pedestal. He too spoke in the alien language.
"Our ships report victories all across the eastern sector of battle. Losses are light on our side, heavy on our enemies."
"Tactical,"
she said, yet it was not English she spoke, nor was it her voice that said it, but another more commanding one which reminded her of Davis. The main screen at the Pentagon Bridge's front wall lit up with a battle plan of a group of stars she had never seen, yet she was intimately familiar with. She smiled at the plan. Detailed on it were hundreds of blue spheres and only, at the most, 50 red triangles.
"Excellent. High Command will be very pleased at this news. Helm, secure from hyperacceleration drive."
She turned to a woman at another console.
"Communicate to the fleet my highest regards. Tell them they will receive a hero's welcome when we reach the twin planets of Home System."
Jade Eve stepped down from the command chair and headed for the lift doors.
"Any orders, Fleet Admiral?"
asked the imposing man. Jade Eve forced a smile. She suspected it might not look genuine.
Jameer, no orders. Just mind your station and stay off my command pedestal,
she said, then entered the lift. She did not like the man Jameer, the ship's first officer. He wanted command of her ship, if not her fleet, and she was not going to simply hand it to him. Jade Eve knew he could resort to other than honorable means to acquire authority, but she did not know how far he might dare to go. She wondered how he was ever accepted into the service in the first place. Quickly Jade Eve made her way through a corridor. The symbols and writing over various doors or equipment were quite intelligible now. She waved her hand over the blue crystal beside a door. It silently whooshed open. Jade Eve was flooded in darkness. Though she could not see a thing, she navigated the room without bumping into anything. Her hand met a switch on the wall, and the room was bathed in light. Jade Eve's mind was overwhelmed with feelings of relief and safety. This room had always been there for her when she was troubled or feeling low. The word home was written all over the warm surroundings of the small cabin. She unzipped her jumpsuit. The zipper was hidden behind a thin fold within the uniform. She found it with practiced ease, and in moments she was removing her boots and slipping out of the red uniform. She discarded the jumpsuit into a cushioned chair and sat on her bed wearing her one-piece undergarment. She let out a sigh of relief, as if when she took off the uniform, she ceased to be the person who wore it day after day. She looked at the uniform's insignia and the gold braids, and lay down on the bed, not taking her eyes off them. The war which had lasted so long, the command of the fleet, responsibilities to it, and the ever-growing feeling of dread every time she stepped onto her ship's bridge, seemed to fade from her mind. She stood and slowly treaded over to the bulkhead to peer out the large plastic steel portal. She pressed her hand against the transparency and peered out at the stars. She had longed for so long to be amongst them, free to wander and explore. She joined the exploration service to escape the confines of her planet. She smiled to herself. She would as a child peer up and watch her planet's twin world orbit silently along with hers and dream of reaching out and touching its jewel-like beauty. She had always wanted to visit the other world, and as soon as she was of age she joined the service so that she could travel between the two. Her first assignment out of the service academy had taken her out of the home system. It was years before she made it back to fulfill her dream. It was lucky that she was visiting the other twin world when the first attacks came from deep space. At first they were unmanned long-range missiles that plowed through the system, spreading destruction as they hit and destroyed outposts and stations. A few had made their way through their defenses and rained death across every continent. Her society's exploration service was reorganized and armed as their system retooled their technology to prepare for war. Her people were horrified at the level of destruction that their unknown enemy had inflicted on them. However, it did not compare with what followed. The missiles turned out to be reconnaissance probes programmed to lock onto signs of intelligent life as they made their way through space. When the first missiles had reached their system, the fleet that had fired them began their journey to seek them out. The neighboring star system had been colonized by their people for only 10 years. When the enemy fleet came upon it, it was decimated. Without provocation or reason, 2 billion people were wiped out. Their sacrifice, though, had given a reprieve to the inhabitants of the home system. The aliens believed that the colonized system was their objective, and after the decimation turned their ships in another direction to seek new prey. It only took her people 3 solar cycles to assemble a sizable space fleet and the newly reorganized exploration force, armed with not only new weapons, but with extensive stellar maps and information about their wing of the galaxy, set out to find the enemy. Jade Eve was only a beginning officer at the onset of the war, but within 10 more solar cycles, and countless battles and encounters with the roving enemy fleet, she had risen from ensign to ship's second officer, then first officer, and upon her commanding officer's death in one battle, assumed command of her ship. Her ship was the flagship for a massive fleet, and after only another cycle the fleet admiral met her death. She was the most capable commanding officer of the fleet and was promoted once again to fleet admiral. The rise was quick and dizzying. She wanted to end this conflict. The enemy fleet was now scattered and her people's forces were now gaining the advantage by pushing them further away from the home system into deeper and deeper space. She knew however, that her people would not be satisfied with simply dispersing the enemy a safe distance from their space. They would insist on total victory, and their enemy's total destruction. Suddenly the ship trembled and shook. She cursed as the ship rocked again. She dashed over to where her uniform lay and reluctantly reached for it. After only a brief second of hesitation, she pulled it on, immediately becoming the extremely burdened fleet commander. Jade Eve barged back onto the bridge. She was outraged to see Jameer sitting in her raised command chair. The man held a smoking laser pistol. 2 female bridge officers lay dead on the deck. The rest were at their stations, afraid to move. On the main screen, an enemy battlecruiser floated off their bow. Jade Eve now knew how far Jameer would go to command his own ship.
Fleet Admiral Jade Eve graces the bridge with her presence. My friends were good enough to provide a small distraction for me to catch everyone off guard and assume control over the bridge. I now command this ship, Admiral.
Jameer, why do this?
I made a deal with them out there. I'd give them this ship in trade for a position as a fleet admiral on their side. This should bring this long war to a close very soon, this being a fleet's flagship and all. The military knowledge in the ship's computers should prove useful to my friends.
You mutinous filth. You would sell out your race to the likes of the enemy.
At least they know how to appreciate the talents of a valuable officer. They will reward me for my actions. What do I get here? Nothing. You pass me over for every promotion I am entitled to. I was in line to a command of my very own ship in this fleet. You denied it to me.
That's because I wanted you on the J course so I could keep an eye on you. Do you think I could have entrusted you with a ship? She would have met her end as soon as you stepped on her decks.
Jameer's eyes reddened with anger. He turned the chair to face Jade Eve and fired the laser. Jade Eve had only a split second to move. She leapt to the deck. The laser beam lanced off her arm. Most of the energy merely impacted on the deck. She lay on the deck clutching her bloodied and charred arm. She knew it would be useless to her for the rest of her life. The beam had severed several arteries. The only thing she did not know was, would the next few minutes be the rest of her life? Jameer's anger leveled slightly.
No, Steve, I won't kill you just yet. I might want you to live a little longer. Perhaps you could come with me to be at my side when I assume my duties with the enemy fleet. Oh, how exhilarating! Having the famed Fleet Admiral Jade at the side of my command position, as I command an entire fleet. Perhaps I'll fashion a leash for you so I can parade you around my ship. That would be enjoyable.
He paused to hit the chair's intercom.
My allies, are you ready to receive the J-Course's computer transmission? It's programmed to transmit all memory to your ship's computers. Please acknowledge.
The screen wavered as the view changed to that of the battlecruiser's bridge. The J-Course's bridge crew gasped collectively. Throughout the many solar cycle war, they had never seen the face of the enemy. What they saw made their skin crawl. The reptilian enemy officer smiled a wide grin full of yellow fangs. Was all it said, and as soon as the monstrosity appeared on the screen, it vanished to be replaced by the battlecruiser. Jameer moved to activate the computer transmission.
It figures that you would sell out to a lizard, Jameer. I always saw you as a wretched snake.
Spirited, aren't you, Jade? Even to the end.
Don't call my name, you snake. Only my family and those I give permission are allowed to speak my name. You are not fit to be part of our race, let alone my family, and permission I did not give.
Careful, woman. Your beauty can only excuse so many breaches of mannerism. Let your sharp tongue cut me one more time, and my laser will mar that pretty body of yours more seriously.
Do you really think that the enemy will trust you with your own ship? A traitor to your own race? You will be discarded by them with as much speed as you have discarded your own people. And when they kill you, you will burn in the flames of the underworld.
Jameer exploded in anger and aimed his laser for what he thought would be a lethal shot for Jade Eve. Expecting the laser's shot this time, she rolled to one side. The shot missed, and she forced herself to her feet. Ignoring the searing pain of her arm, She vaulted herself at the navigation console. She did not have time to push any particular control. Her body hit several at once. The panel overloaded and she felt a shock of the energy being discharged through her. The pain only drove her forward as she rolled off the console, avoiding more injury as it sparked. The ship rolled as artificial gravity was disrupted for a few seconds. Everyone lost their seats, floated, then came crashing to the deck. As she expected, Jameer fell from the command pedestal and onto the deck. With her good hand she withdrew the dagger she wore as a decoration on her boot. The blade was small, but sharp, and sliced easily through Jameer's jugular vein. He lived all of the next 10 seconds before bleeding to death. Jade Eve and the helm officer fought with the controls, managing to steady the ship after some effort. After the ship was flying upright, Jade Eve heard the high-pitched whine coming from her command pedestal. She ascended the steps and looked on in horror at the activated control. It was hidden in an open panel within the chair's arm, unlocked with the special spoken combination of passwords. Tears flowed down her cheeks as she hit the chair's arm with her good hand. She sat in the chair and put her face in her bloodied hand. Jameer had been stopped from transmitting the ship's memory to the enemy, but he had succeeded in killing the crew of her flagship. J. Corsa's helm officer heard the whine too. He, like Jameer, was one of few who knew where the button was and the passwords that gave access to it. Jameer had it waiting in case something went wrong with his plan.
Fleet Admiral, what is wrong?
Jameer has activated the ship's intruder assault system,
explained the helm officer.
In the event that the course is boarded by the enemy, the captain must release a poison gas throughout the ship, killing both invader and crew. The vaccine to the poison is a very rare substance. Only a select few personnel in the entire fleet are vaccinated against it. Only fleet admirals.
Jade Eve sobbed as an orange gas filtered through the bridge's ventilation system. The effects were quick and for the crew's sake, painless. Minutes later she lifted her head from her hand and dried her eyes. The gas burned her lungs and made her eyes water even more, but she was still alive. She looked around at the stilt figures of her dead crew. The enemy battle cruiser sat patiently off their bow waiting for the promised transmission. Jade Eve went to the bridge's weapons console and hit a control. They'd have to wait in hell now, she thought. She usually felt satisfaction when her ship scored a kill against the enemy. The sight of the J. Corsa's nuclear missiles blowing the battle cruiser into rubble held no such feelings this day. For this kill, she'd paid with her dearest's blood. More than a day later, Jade Eve stood before row upon row of stasis tubes. At least her crew would be preserved for an honorable burial on one of the twin planets of Home System, all except Jameer's. She had taken personal delight in dumping his corpse into the ship's generator plant. She wished he could have been alive when he hit the annihilating forces of the generator, but his death was at least painful, and she had been there to see his life drain from him. She collapsed onto the deck. She had not eaten, nor slept, for over 36 hours. Dragging 75 bodies into stasis tubes with only one arm, while fighting the pain of the other, took everything she had. She did not think it was proper to rest until all her crew was attended to. They were good men and women. Their death was a terrible wrong, and she felt wrong to have survived them. Back on her bridge, she sat on her command pedestal. She had just finished recording her final log entry. Her work had broken open her injured arm, and was now covered with fresh blood. With what strength she had left, she descended her pedestal and assumed the helm console. When she hurled herself at the console the day earlier, she had unwittingly smashed the main guidance controls. The ship was now locked on a course she had no control over. She wondered if she could go below deck and make repairs on the controls and override the console. She was growing lightheaded, and knew the answer. She had lost too much blood in the last day. Death was not far from claiming her. She would soon pass on to another plane of existence, her afterlife, where she could be with her crew and ancestors, for the rest of eternity. With the last of her will and strength, she had made it to her quarters, the only place on the ship she felt at peace. Within, she could let the eternal sleep of death shroud her soul. She slowly and painfully slipped out of her uniform, and laid on her bed. She thought of the 75 bodies in the stasis tubes, and the ship, now hurling through the galaxy on an unknown course. She had set the ship in motion with a hyper-acceleration drive at a speed the engines could handle, and at a part consumption rate the generators could continuously supply. She programmed the computers to shut down all ship's functions in 1 hour. By then she would surely be dead. With everything shut down, the ship could continue its path through space. Maybe the rest of her fleet would discover it, and take her crew to the final resting place they deserved. She looked over at her torn and bloodied uniform, discarded on a chair, and smiled. She no longer had to be the fleet admiral. She could be herself now, simply a young woman who used to dream of the stars and how she might travel between them. Her breath became shallow, the pain began to fade, and her heart slowly wound down. She drifted off to sleep, a sleep which blended into a painless death. Telesa's eyelids fluttered. Her broken ribs did not hurt as much as before, and even her ankle seemed better. She looked up. The transparent figure of the woman Telesa had experienced being in her dream hovered over her. Jade Eve smiled down at her.
You will find your injuries virtually healed now. The energies contained in my body mended you.
Telesa's eyebrow went up in surprise at her voice. It seemed to echo in her head as she spoke. Her voice was not sound, as there was no atmosphere within the ship to carry it.
You are speaking now. Also in Federation Standard, not the language I remember in my experience.
The woman nodded, and again, surprise registered by Telesa. She had no communicator by which to receive her suit's transmission, yet she heard every word Telesa spoke.
Yes, I needed to merge with your mind to learn how to speak your language. In turn, I showed you the last moments of my life.
Telesa shook her head and closed her eyes, trying to clear her still clouded mind. She opened her eyes again, hoping that the apparition would be gone, but she remained before her, unwavering.
This is not logical. The existence of ghosts is unscientific, to put it mildly. I have to be delirious from my fall.
If not logical, then ask yourself, what caused your fall, and who brought you to this small room?
I do not know.
I am responsible. I offer my apologies for that. Your mind is terribly strong. The only way I could endure it was if your mental shields were clown. The pain caused by your injuries weakened those shields enough to me to become you, and you me. I took you to the storage room to prevent your unconscious body from being discovered.
If I am to accept this as the truth, I accept that you are indeed a ghost. Then, may I ask, why are you here, and not in the afterlife, with your crew?
Telesa, you experienced my thoughts. I wanted my crew to have an honorable burial on their home planets. I have been sailing the stars for over 5 years, waiting for my fleet to find this ship. But the J-Course was headed away from home into unknown space. Yours is the first ship to encounter mine. Telesa, I cannot rest until my ship is home. Will you help me? I haven't the physical body to alter the course of the ship. You do. Please send us home.
Telesa examined her ribs. Somehow, they had been healed, as were her other injuries. She checked her suit over. It was undamaged. Even her jammed communicator was operational. She gathered all her strength and stood.
Even though lacking a physical body, you seem to have quite extraordinary powers, even for a ghost.
Telesa picked up her tricorder, adjusted the settings, sighed, and looked at the apparition before her.
I will help. My experience with you has left me some of your technical knowledge intact within my memory. Altering your course should not be difficult.
Jade Eve smiled warmly and near Telesa. This time, she did not retreat. Telesa felt her mind being entered once again. It was in a manner very similar to the Vulcan mind touch, reminiscent to a warm embrace. Jade Eve retreated from Telesa's mind to hover near her. She raised her hand in the ages-old traditional Vulcan hand salute. This time, she spoke in Vulcan.
Live long and prosper, Telesa, sister to my mind and spirit. I shall wait in the afterworld for you so we may renew the friendship which today was born.
Telesa returned the salute with a gloved hand.
exist long and prosper, Jade Eve, sister to my heart and soul.
Jade Eve smiled, then slowly faded from view. On the alien bridge, Nichols paced the deck nervously. In the 2 hours since Talissa had been missing, she had gone over most of the bridge and found the navigation board. Unfortunately, it was indeed the one board which had been smashed. She ran her hands over the useless controls. Suddenly the board flew into life, lights snapping on and damaged circuits sparking. Nichols hit what she hoped was the override controls. She chose right. The board went dark, and the sparks died down. She hit her communicator.
Excalibur, any status change on the alien vessel?
The engines just powered up, and the ship turned 180 degrees about. You're now heading right back the way the ship came. Speed is at warp 2 and accelerating. Mr. Collier, pursuit course. Match speed and heading. The exact course will take the ship out of Federation space into uncharted territory. We'll have to risk a nav warp beam out again. Prepare to beam back to the Excalibur. Has Talissa been found yet?
No. I have Dr. Verrill looking, and the salvage team as well.
Tell the doctor and the salvage team to report back to the bridge. It's safer to beam you out from that location, since there isn't as much alien ship between you and us. With all of you off, we'll hopefully be able to pinpoint Talissa's location via sensors before the engine's radiation interferes.
Back on the Excalibur bridge, Davis paced the upper deck near the science station, her impatience brimming over. She turned to Sky at the sensors.
Lieutenant, have they all been back yet?
The last of the salvage team is coming over now. Commander Santi wanted to lodge a complaint. His team had barely a chance to start their salvage operations.
My major concern is for my first officer. I'll tell the commander where he can put his complaint.
The boarding parties are all off the alien ship. Starting an all-deck sensor scan. Captain, sensors are still being interfered with.
Damn.
Captain, communication from the alien ship.
Commander, on audio.
Excalibur. Come in, Excalibur.
Davis hit her intercom. A little too hard, she noticed. She was unsure if it was from annoyance or sheer joy of finally hearing from her first officer.
Talissa, where the hell have you been?
Captain, I was exploring the vessel. I would be very appreciative if you would have the transporter room lock on and beam me aboard before the ship's acceleration makes it difficult to transport back.
Talissa, why haven't you answered our contact checks? The salvage team has been looking all over that ship for you. What have you been doing all this time?
Captain, explanations will have to wait.
Davis switched her chair's intercom channel. Again, she hit the control a little too hard.
Transporter room, lock on to Commander Talissa's communicator. Energize when locked on. Talissa, you better have one first-class explanation ready when you beam back. To say we've all been a bit worried over here would be the understatement of the century.
Captain, the alien ship is accelerating to warp 7.
Match speed.
Captain, transporter room signals they have Commander Talissa aboard.
On the main screen, the Golden Orb ship accelerated ahead of the Excalibur. Suddenly it met a spatter of brilliant colors which appeared directly across its path. No explosion occurred, but the ship merely vanished. It was many hours later when Talissa, in duty uniform, stood beside Davis's command chair watching the recording.
Talissa, you want to explain this one more time?
Captain, certainly. Through my research on the ship, I discovered that it belonged to a race which fought a war with a savage reptilian warrior civilization, some 10,000 years ago. Some disaster had befallen the ship, leaving only the ship's captain alive. She too died later. The ship, with its navigational controls destroyed, wandered at a constant speed through the galaxy. It collided with an interspatial warp which transported it into our time. That is how it escaped detection from any local space traffic. It also explains why the design of the ship was totally alien to us. It was from another time, another era of spaceflight. Starfleet has known about the interspatial warp for some time, theorizing that it would collapse upon itself any time now. When the ship passed through it the first time, it was weakened considerably. I knew it could not stay open for long, hence the hasty action to redirect the ship's course and speed.
Tilesa, why send it back at all? Even though it was from another time, it could have proven to be a technological find.
Captain, if the entire crew of the Excalibur were to die, and you were the last survivor, what would you consider your last duty to them as payment to their loyal service?
Davis began to realize what Talisa was driving at.
To see they are returned to their families for burial.
Exactly.
Tilesa, I can see your point now. I was only seeing the value of the ship, not the crew. You sent them home, then?
I programmed the navigational coordinates as close as I could come to the exact flight path the ship assumed as soon as it materialized in our time. That should have sent it back only a few years after it vanished from its time.
I'd like to know something. It took me the better of an hour to just begin to understand that ship's equipment, and what I did figure out was based on trial and error. How did you repair the navigational equipment, redirect the ship's course, and program the engines to power up after I shut them down, I might add? Matter of fact, how did you find the tools and the damaged equipment at all?
I learned a great deal from the computer banks I accessed.
Talisa's eyebrow went up, as if she were amused with herself.
I could also say that the ghosts of the ship around me may have had a hand in guiding my research.
Commander, please spare me the Vulcan attempt at humor. That makes no sense.
If you will excuse me, I had duties to perform at my station, tricorder recordings to download, and the captain instructed me to look up Murphy's Law after this was over.
Davis couldn't help herself, and attempted to stifle a laugh.
Robin, I don't know. I think she may have the knack for Vulcan humor, after all.
Nichols went back to her station muttering under her breath, shaking her head, still not wholly believing the story Talisa had told. Davis signed a report and cast a glance at her Vulcan first officer. She sat at her console busying herself with her tricorder discs. Davis handed the clipboard back to the young male yeoman and reclined in her chair. She let out a sigh.
Mr. Collier, lay in a course for Starbase 11. Ahead warp factor.
She paused to look over at Nichols.
Engineer, is warp factor 4 fast enough for you?
Captain. It'll do,
said Nichols, not taking her eyes off a monitor, then turning her head to give Davis a smirk.
Collier, you heard the lady?
Captain, aye, ahead, warp factor 4.
Meanwhile, in another part of space and time, a vortex of spattered color appeared off the side of a huge armada of spherical ships. A battle alert was sounded at the craft's sudden appearance from nowhere. On the fleet's flagship, the captain turned his raised chair toward the communications officer.
Secure from alert status. It's one of ours. Science officer, report.
Admiral, it is the J course.
Any communication?
On the deserted, wrecked bridge of the J course, the automated sensors detected the huge armada as soon as the ship had fully materialized. Its automated communications console lit up into life.
Affirmative. Picture and audio signal.
Main screen.
The bridge of the J course came into focus on the main screen. Jade Eve sat in the command chair holding her wounded arm. She had recorded this message immediately after the grueling task of preserving her crew for burial.
Fellow compatriots, greetings. I am sorry to inform you that the entire ship's complement, as well as myself, have perished from one man's act of mutiny, treason, and murder. If we are ever found, and this log is played, let the record show that the entire crew of the J course, with the exception of First Officer Jameer, are to receive the highest commendations for bravery. The ship's computer banks hold a recording of what exactly happened to us. I will leave further explanation up to its review. In closing, I wish to say that I hope with all my soul that this ship and crew will once again see the home system.
Inform High Command that we have found the J course. Report all crew dead and to prepare a board of investigation as soon as we make orbit around the twin worlds of home system. Additionally, ask them to inform the crew's families of their fate. I will contact Fleet Admiral Jade Eve's family personally.
Fleet Admiral, should we not take J course to our nearest base?
No, First Officer. The crew of J course have been waiting nearly 5 years for a burial. I want their souls to rest in peace as soon as possible. Not only the crew, but the captain. I would not be surprised if Fleet Admiral Jade Eve has haunted the decks of her ship waiting for the moment she too can go to her final and deserved rest.
The Admiral paused in brief silence, and a private prayer for a fellow Fleet Admiral, and above else, for a beloved sister.
Activate tractor fields around J course and execute course.
On board the J course, the golden luminescent form of Jade Eve, seated on her command pedestal, dressed in a flowing luminescent gown, not the uniform she had finally been able to shed, smiled. She knew now was the time for her well-deserved sleep. Slowly, her golden body dissolved into the vacuum of the dead ship, leaving it forever